All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. This time, we're digging into something I think a lot of us have probably experienced in some way. Hypernormalization, but
Yeah.
specifically how it plays out in, well, how about we just call them what they are, toxic workplaces.
Yeah, and you've given me some fascinating material to work with for this one.
I'm excited to unpack it all.
Me too.
So, we've all probably experienced those little everyday annoyances at work, right?
Right.
But what we're looking at today is how those things can sometimes be a sign of a much bigger kind of a systemic issue.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah,
that documentary Hypernormalization
I have.
by Adam Curtis.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's I think it was based on this idea of hypernormalization from Alexei Yurchak.
Okay, so it goes way back.
It does, it does.
But so how do we actually see that playing out, like, on a daily basis in these toxic workplaces?
So I think the source material you gave me does a really good job of pointing out a few kind of key examples of this. Of these seemingly small, like you said, everyday behaviors that people will kind of just shrug off as part of the job,
Right, exactly.
but they're actually quite harmful, like in the long run.
Okay, so give me an example.
So one would be overwork disguised as dedication.
Okay, so like you're expected to answer emails at like midnight
Yeah.
or come in when you're sick and it's seen as like you're such a hard worker and dedicated, but it's actually just leading to burnout.
Right. And it's often rationalized or even celebrated. Like you hear people bragging about how many all-nighters they've pulled.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like a badge of honor. But
Yeah.
it's not sustainable in the long run.
It's great. It's like you're being conditioned to think that burning yourself out is the only way to succeed.
Exactly.
So what else? What other kind of signs should we be looking out for?
So your source material also talks about
Yeah.
micromanagement being framed as like having high standards.
Okay, so like that boss that's constantly looking over your shoulder, criticizing everything you do.
Yeah, like making you feel like you can never do anything right.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And that leads to such a like suffocating environment where creativity and any kind of independent thought is just stifled.
You're walking on eggshells all the time,
Exactly.
afraid to make a mistake.
And it's emotionally draining too.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like
Yeah.
your self-worth is just constantly being chipped away.
Absolutely.
And so, okay, so this is all pretty bad so far.
Yeah.
What else is in this material that we should be thinking about?
So your material also mentions things like bullying and gaslighting as kind of major red flags.
Okay, so we're getting into some serious territory here.
Yeah, and those are things that are intentionally designed to, undermine your confidence, make
Yeah.
you doubt your own perceptions.
So like spreading rumors, making you question your own sanity.
Yeah, and, gaslighting in particular can be so difficult to call out.
Right, because they're making you think that you're the one that's crazy.
Exactly,
So with all of this going on, I can see how someone could feel trapped in this kind of a situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine that feeling trapped just makes the situation even worse.
Right, yeah.
So like, how does that play out? Like what other kinds of things start to happen?
So, once you start to feel trapped, that's when you're more likely to kind of just accept unfair treatment or exploitation.
Like being paid less than someone else for doing the same job.
Yeah, or being passed over for a promotion with, no real justification.
And it's easy to just start to think that that's normal.
Right. You just think that's how it is.
So, okay, so now we recognize that we're in this situation, we're in this hyper-normalized state.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? Like, how do we actually break free from this?
So the good news is that your source material actually outlines several steps that people can take to start to reclaim their power.
Okay, good.
And the first, and probably the most important one, is just recognizing the problem for what it is.
Okay, so kind of like we've been doing, just being honest with yourself.
Yeah, like really taking a step back and asking yourself, how is this environment actually impacting me?
Right.
Is this really okay?
Right, and not just kind of brushing it off.
Exactly, and refusing to minimize or rationalize those toxic behaviors.
So once you've, had that honest moment with yourself, what's next?
So the next thing would be to start documenting everything.
Okay, so like saving emails.
Yeah, keep a detailed journal, like create a paper trail that you can refer back to.
Right, because that can be so important
Yeah,
if you need to take further action, like if it gets into a legal situation or something.
exactly.
So what else can we do?
And then, it's also important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone.
Right.
The source material really stresses the importance of seeking support.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
I've heard from so many people that just talking to a friend or a colleague or even a therapist,
Hmm.
it can make such a huge difference.
It can be really validating.
Yeah. Just knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And what about HR? Is that a good resource in this kind of situation?
So HR can be helpful, but it's important to remember that their first priority is to protect the company,
Right.
not the individual employee. So,
Proceed with caution.
yes.
So documentation, support. What about setting boundaries?
Yes. So setting boundaries is another really important step.
And I feel like that could feel really empowering in a situation where you might feel powerless.
Yeah, you have a right to protect your time and energy.
Right.
Saying no to unreasonable demands, that's not selfish, it's self-preservation.
But what if you've done all of that? You've tried setting boundaries, you've talked to HR, you've documented things,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing changes. What happens then?
So that's where speaking up more strategically comes in.
Okay.
And it's not just about complaining, it's about really framing your concerns in a way that will resonate with those who have the power to make changes.
Okay, so offering solutions, not just problems. But, I mean, let's be real. There are times when even the best efforts they fail, they don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So then what? What happens then?
Well, sometimes the healthiest choice is just to remove yourself from that toxic environment completely.
You mean find a new job?
Yeah. Update that resume, start networking,
Yeah.
start looking for a new job. Sometimes that's the best way to protect your well-being and your career.
So while you're going through all of that, the job searching, and you're still stuck in that environment,
Mm.
your source also talks about how it's important to kind of mentally detach as much as possible.
Yeah, find ways to protect yourself emotionally.
Right.
So focus on your long-term goals, Invest in your own personal and professional growth.
Take some classes.
Just learn new skills, work on a side hustle.
Right.
Whatever you need to do to kind of stay sane.
To stay sane, yeah, and hopeful.
Exactly.
So after this deep dive into hypernormalization in the workplace, I mean, what's the key takeaway here for our listeners?
I think it's that you don't have to accept dysfunction as being inevitable, you know? Recognizing it, like we said, that's the first step.
Right.
To reclaiming your power and change can happen.
Individually
and collectively.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And just as a final thought for you, our listener, think about other areas in your life
Mm-hmm.
where you might be kind of unconsciously accepting a hypernormalized reality that's really not serving you anymore.
Interesting.
That's something to ponder, isn't it?
It is.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for having me.